Hello everyone, thanks for tuning into the latest opinion poll tracker video from Gavin Partridge YouTube channel for the next UK general election. So here we go again, time to bring you another tracker video. We're going to have a look at the latest prediction, electoral calculus for the next UK general election based on opinion polls conducted during April. We'll have a look at those polls as well. We'll bring you up to date with the local election results, go through those, and also go through the result for the Runcorn and Helsby, I think it is, by-election that came through on Thursday night and in the early hours of Friday morning as well. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and I shall talk you through our latest opinion poll tracker vlog in a moment. Just say that you enjoy the vlogs on the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much, everyone, for doing that. Right, okay, let's take ourselves off to, going to be an action-packed video bits. Let's take ourselves off to electoral calculus. Have a look at their prediction then. So, in 5, in 4, in 3, in 2, in 1. Boom! And here we go. So, they are saying this month that Reform is the biggest party. So hung parliament, sure, overall of a majority by 81 seats. Reform, sure, 81 of an overall majority. That's a significant change on last month when it's actually Labour, sure, I think about 137 of an overall majority. So April did see a swing, clearly, towards Reform, and let's go through the numbers then. So we've got our party columns here: Conservatives, Labour, Liberal Democrat, Reform, Green, etc. 2024 votes and seats there, and then predicted votes and seats just here. So, based on the opinion polls conducted during April, the Conservatives have a predicted share of the vote of just 21.4%, giving them a central prediction of just 94 seats. That's actually down on the totally dreadful 121 seats they got from the 2024 general election on 24.4% of the vote. So Conservatives going backwards there with the opinion polls during April base compared to where they were excuse me, in the election. There's always a margin of error with any predictions. So at the high end, the Conservatives could get 259 seats. At the low end, they could be down as low as 36 seats, virtually wipe out. Labour not doing a great deal better, though, in terms of the predicted share of the vote. They are on a predicted share of just 23.4% of the vote, which does still yield them 177 seats, though. At the high end, they could be as high as 322. Note that is short, though, of a 326 you need to form an overall majority government. It's not quite 326, actually. It's about 323. But anyway, more or less just short of an overall majority there. At the low end, they could be as low as just 80 seats. Liberal Democrats up slightly on where it was at the general election, but not by much. 13.7% predicted share of vote on 60 seats. High end, they could be as high as 92. Low end, they could be down 26. And then we come to Reform on a predicted share of vote of 25.5%. So in the lead, leading both Conservatives and Labour there, on a central seat prediction of 245 seats. At the high end, they could be as high as 361. That is significant overall majority. Probably would be translate to an overall majority of about 40 seats. That's something like that. 40 or 50 seats. At the low end, they could be as low as 84 seats. Though, very significant increase for Reform based on compared to where it was at the election on 14.7% of vote and just 5 seats. But Greens are on a predicted share of vote of 9.6. That's up on what they got in the general election. Predicted seat share of 4 seats. Could be as high as 28, could be as low as 3. SNP only 0.3 up on the general election, 2.6 at the election to 2.9% predicted, but getting a central prediction of 43 seats. At the high end, they could be as high as 46, which is all of the seats in Scotland. At the low end, as low as 15. So a big range of error, big margin of error there for the SNP. Applied on a set prediction of 4 seats, others on 5, and then we come down to the Northern Irish parties down here. So if that came off, we would be looking at Reform, I say 81 seats short of an overall majority if they did a deal with the Conservatives, some sort of, coalition agreement. They would be the biggest party, and the Conservatives would be the junior party, which would be very interesting to see. And that would get Reform and Conservatives, over the line, and they'd have an overall majority there. I don't think any other combination worked, so I don't think. Last month we talked about possibility of a very unusual, very bizarre sort of national government of Labour and Conservatives, but that wouldn't be doable really on 94 and 177. That would still leave Labour, Conservatives overall short of a majority. And no different for Labour and the Liberals, even if you put in the Greens and the SNP. I think you're still short of 326 there, so that won't work either. The only combination that could get a majority would be like Reform and then Conservatives as the junior party. Reform 81 seats short of a majority. Right, these are the opinion polls that that prediction was based upon during April 2025. Now, notice, so we start down here, and we finish up there. Now, notice, like, in the early and mid part of the table there, we do see some red, we do see some Labour leads. So we've got Opinium, for example, giving Labour a 1% lead. We've got Lord Ashcroft, peer of around, giving Labour a 3% lead. We've got YouGov giving Labour a 1% lead, and another YouGov just here, 1% lead. We do still get some Reform leads as well. They're particularly coming in the early part of the table from Find Out Now. So we've got a Find Out Now poll there with 6% the Reform lead, and again Find Out Now 4% Reform lead. Freshwater Strategy gave Reform a 1% lead, and then there's quite a few ties like More in Common, just here for example, and Techni, Focal Data as well. However, it looks like there's a bit of a change when we get into the middle part of April. This is as the local election campaign starts picking up, and then we start to see a lot more Reform lead. So we've got Find Out Now again, giving Reform a 6% lead. We've got More in Common giving Reform a 2% lead. YouGov gave Reform a 2% lead. Find Out Now, another poll giving Reform this time an 8% lead. Some ties there from More in Common, Techni and Opinion, and then we come up to the end of April. YouGov giving Reform a 3% lead, and Find Out Now giving Reform an 8% lead. That's 29% for Reform, 21% for Labour, I think that is. And no, I think that's 21%. Yeah, 21% for Labour, 19% for the Conservatives there. So it looks as though as April went along, there was a swing towards Reform as we saw the local election campaign, picking up. So what you have to bear in mind with this prediction is that Reform short 81 of an overall majority, Reform being pegged back a little bit because of the polls earlier in April. The later April polls probably would have seen Reform even fewer seats short of an overall majority. And I mean, Find Out Now, which what is looking a little bit of an outlier compared to the other polls in terms of its Reform lead, but more about that in a second. But this Find Out Now, for example, would be majority government territory, I think, for Reform there, 29%. lead of over 21% for Labour and 19% for the Conservatives. So, I mean, that's a shocking poll for the Conservatives as well, to be falling under, 20%. But Labour, I mean, on the threshold of falling under 20% as well. These are extraordinary polls, absolutely amazing. For those of us that have always known, like the Labour and Conservative or Conservative Labour duopoly, these are absolutely extraordinary polls. The only time that we've gone through anything like this is like since the Second World War anyway, would be in the early 1980s when we had a split in the Labour Party and the SDP party was formed, and eventually they of course merged with the old Liberal Party, and became the Liberal Democrats. And for a while in the early 80s, around 1980, when it looked as though the SDP Liberal Alliance might supplant Labour, but in the end it didn't happen. But that's the only time, since war that we've seen anything like this. Then going back before that, it would be in the 1920s when Labour replaced the old Liberal Party as first the opposition and then as a party of government. So it's like a once-in-a-century type event that we're seeing here. Absolutely extraordinary. More about that, those find out now leads in a moment. Let's have a quick look at the government approval tracker, shall we? Let's do that. So this from YouGov, of course, we see 62% now are disapproving of the government, 15% are approving of the government, and that is again under the don't knows. It doesn't look as though the Labour government is doing really much better than like the Conservative government was just before they were voted out of office, really. Not quite as bad as the Conservatives. The Conservative disapproval was up here. Labour haven't quite got to that just yet, but Labour are doing very, very poorly, really, considering they haven't even been in power for a year. Yeah, this is really, really bad polling for the Labour Party. And talking about that, well, what about Runcorn and Helsby by-election? So this was the result. It saw Reform, of course, gaining this seat from Labour. Reform got 38.72% vote, up 20% on the general election. Labour got 38.7% of vote. That was that 30. Let's do that again. So Reform got 38.72% vote. Incredibly tight election. Labour got 38.70% of the vote. It's just a percentage point difference, but that was Labour down 14%. So that meant that Reform took the seat on 12,645 votes to Labour's 12,639 votes. So Reform took the seat on an incredibly tight margin, just six votes in it. So it doesn't get much tighter than that. And I believe that is like the tightest by-election result that we've ever seen. The thing to focus on, though, of course, although it looks, although it is very tight in terms of the votes and the percentage, but it's the swing that you need to really focus on there. That is I think, about 17% swing from Labour to Reform. So I suppose Labour would get some consolation, but it's under 20%. So if you start getting 20% swings against the governing party, normally that's a sign that the government is on its last legs, usually. It's just under like a 20% swing, but nevertheless 17% is a very large swing, particularly for this early in the parliament. It's more like the swing you'd expect to see in a midterm by-election. Remember, we're not even a year into the government yet, a year into the parliament. So a 17% swing from Labour to Reform, I would suggest, although it is under 20%, I would suggest, though, it's very concerning for Labour, because those swings are likely, if what normally happens in a parliament is that the government gets more unpopular by midterm. So if we start seeing So a 70% swing, in the first year of the parliament against the government, and by midterm you'd expect to be seeing 20% plus swings, I think, in by-elections. And I say when the governing party gets like 20% plus swings against them, that's normally a sign that they're on their last days. Of course, we also had local elections, which reform. Well, if you're a Reform supporter, this vlog is your vlog. I think we also had local council elections, which Reform won as well. So in the local elections, they actually got 30% projected national share of the vote, winning 677 seats and 10 councils. They got 805 seats there. So net change 677. We got the Liberal Democrats then coming in second, which is really bizarre. So they got a projected national share of the vote of 17%. We had the Conservatives on 15% projected national share of the vote. They lost 676 councillors, and I think they lost 33. They lost 16 councils. Sorry, they lost all the councils they were defending. And then we had Labour coming in on a projected share of the vote there on 20%. So why is Labour down there? Hang on, what's happening there? So projected share 20%. So why is Labour? They're probably down there because of the number of seats that they had at the end of the election. Actually, so it wasn't Liberal. Sorry, it wasn't Liberal Democrats in second place. Labour was in second place. I thought that was strange. Labour in second place on a projected share of 20% of the vote. Then it was the Liberal Democrats on 17% of the vote in third place, and the Conservatives were on 15% projected national share of vote in fourth place. That's more like it, isn't it? That's more like what the opinion polls are showing. No, Labour's still in second place, but 20% projected share of vote, that's pretty atrocious. And of course, this looks more like what, go back here, more like what Find Out Now is suggesting. So these bigger Find Out Now leads, 8%, and down here 6%, compared to like ones and twos, 1%, 2%. That's more like what we're seeing in that by-election. Bear in mind, in the general election, I should say. Bear in mind, though, the general election was county council, so it was like the shires, really, that were voting in the main, in this particular set of local elections. There wasn't any metropolitan boroughs, so like London wasn't included, and I don't think there's many of the big cities included as well. So Labour, if like the metropolitan boroughs had been included, Labour would have probably been on a little bit of a higher projected national share of the vote there. But nevertheless, concerning times for Labour, and very, very, very concerning signs, I would suggest, for the Conservative Party. Let's have a look at the graph. By the way, these are being results we've had since the start of May, just up here. And you'll see there have been more Reform leads. A YouGov poll that came out, I think it's today, giving Labour a 7% lead. So YouGov shifting towards Find Out Now with some rather bigger Labour leads. We've also had Opinium, Reform leads, I should say. We've also had Opinium giving Reform a 1% lead. I think that's the first time Opinium have had Reform in the lead, and More in Common giving Reform a 4% lead. So as we're going along, more and more sort of, is it turquoise? More and more turquoise for Reform there is appearing. It does look as though Reform are very much in the ascendancy, and they can expect a further boost, I think, in the next few days from the publicity they've had from their successes in the local elections. This is how the overall polling graph is looking. Quite a shocker. This show Reform breaking away now from the other parties and lifting up towards that all-important 30% share. Well, you always should say 40% was like the target for any governing party, for the governing party to get to. The party wants to win the election. 40% was 40% like gold standard. But of course, when we had a two-party system, as we've got like a five-party thing going on here, then 30%, or low 30s anyway, probably becomes enough for a party to get an overall majority if the vote, is split between the other four. So we've got Reform breaking away, heading up towards perhaps 30%. We'll see about that. Labour's trend line is continuing to drop. Conservative trend line is doing a little bit of a plunge there. So we've got Labour and Conservatives both down, but Conservatives down significantly more than Labour, but they're both doing pretty badly. Liberal Democrats lifting up, as they always do during local elections. So the Liberal Democrats' trend line is lifting there, and the Greens' trend line has lifted a little bit as well. So we shall see what happens. These are very interesting times. I've got a feeling next month's electoral calculus prediction might show Reform with an overall majority. It'll be very small, but I think the opinion polls shifting more towards Reform this month after the local elections and that by-election. I think we'll see more Reform leads, bigger leads as well, and so this prediction, Reform short 81 overall majority, might change next month to Reform with an overall majority of, I don't know, probably 10, 20 seats, something like that. Be very, very interesting to see what happens. Right, okay, well, interesting times, aren't they? Oh, whichever party you support, everybody watching this can have their own views and their own opinions about which party they're supporting, but whatever you think about it all, it's very interesting. You can't say, but it's not an interesting period to be witnessing, with potentially the Conservatives being replaced by an upstart party. Who would have thought that could happen? Well, if you enjoyed the vlog, please do like, share, subscribe. We'll be back next month with another tracker video. And of course, let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. We'll see you soon. For this one, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.